I used dating apps sporadically a few years ago, and then more recently, this story happened approximately 1 year ago. It had been quite a while since I was last on a dating app, but taking the advice of a friend, I decided to try again. I downloaded an app called Hench, and after about 2 weeks of using it, I met a very nice woman. We talked for a while, and we exchanged phone numbers. From there, we started texting each other for several days and even did a FaceTime video call, and I thought everything was going well. I liked her. She had long blonde hair and very pretty eyes. We agreed to go to a restaurant in town. I thought the date was pretty good. When I met her in person, she looked great, and talking to her face to face was nice. The conversation flowed pretty well. Overall, I felt like we could have connected a little better, like maybe we were both a little nervous, but overall it was okay. After the appointment, everyone returned to her house, but she suggested that we repeat it some other time. Then we set up the next appointment. We went to another restaurant in town after the second date, which was just as good as the first. She asked me if I wanted to see her house. She said it was not very far, and that I could spend a few minutes if I wanted to spend some time. It was probably like 9 p.m. At that moment, I agreed, and we both went out to the parking lot and got into our cars. She told me to follow her, and we left. I followed her down a few quiet streets and was curious to see where she lived. We took a long road that seemed to take us to the middle of nowhere. On either side were mostly farms and woods. There were hardly any other cars on the road. After about 20 minutes of driving, we finally reached a dirt road. I was still following her, and soon she turned into a long driveway. But at the end of the driveway, which was quite long, she parked, and I did the same behind her. There was an average-sized 2-story house on the property. She looked quite old and wasn't in very good shape. He didn't seem like the kind of person who would live there, and to be honest, he scared me a little too. Don't bother checking my phone to see where we were going or anything. After we parked, she got out of her car, and I got out of mine. I also said something like, "You live here," she replied. "Yeah, why are you surprised?" She walked across the front yard to the door, and I followed her. The lights inside were all off, and she didn't turn any on, which I thought was odd. I started looking for a light switch myself. That's when she told me she could go down to the basement, and she pointed. I could barely see anything, but I made out a staircase just in front and to the left, and it seemed to lead to an unfinished basement as well. I asked, "Are there lights?" I remember she said we could turn them on when we got down. At that moment, I was already very scared and didn't want to be there any longer. I was still close to the door, so I just opened it and went out. I started walking to my car, but I noticed that she was coming behind me, so I started running, ran to my car, unlocked it, got in quickly, closed the doors, and started the engine. I saw him running to the front of my car. I started backing up to leave. As I did, she gave me a really unsettling smile and waved at me. That was possibly the creepiest moment of the whole night, and I'll never forget it. I eventually had to stop to find out where it was, but once I entered the directions into my phone, I managed to get back. That's still, by far, the craziest date I've ever been on. This is a story of when I met a guy in Tinder several years ago. I ran into a guy named Mike. He had dark hair. There wasn't much information about him on his profile, but after we met, he sent me a message. At first, he said hello, and I said hello. He also started talking to me in a very basic way, saying things like, "How are you?" or "What's up?" Eventually, things got a little better, and based on his profile, he seemed to be something of a nature lover. After talking to him on and off for a couple of days, he asked me out on a date. I asked him what he had in mind and he suggested a local restaurant. So the next day I spoke briefly with him early to confirm that we were still planning for that night, which we confirmed. The restaurant was about 10 minutes from my house and seemed like a cute place I had never been to before. There were a decent amount of people there, but it was like 6:50 a.m., so I wasn't sure if Mike had already arrived or not. I looked to understand, but he hadn't said anything since I told him he was going to the restaurant, and he said, "Sounds good." After waiting in my car until 7, I decided to go into the restaurant. I went in, grabbed a table, and told the waiter I was expecting someone. Then I texted Mike that he was already there and that he had a table. Several minutes passed and he didn't respond. Soon it was 7:15. And sent him another message asking what was going on. He didn't respond to that either. I waited until 7:30. And then I left the restaurant, got out of my car, and went home. I was very upset. But while I was driving back, I noticed halfway there that a car had been following me for a while. I don't really remember him following me from the restaurant because he wasn't looking back, but I do remember he was on First Street, and then when I turned the car around, he did the same thing. After the next turn, I was still there, but I didn't really think someone was following me until I got to my street. My street is residential and generally very quiet. Normally there aren't many people driving through it, so when the car turned, I was really alarmed. I went to my house, which is the fourth on the left. I parked in the driveway and the car continued to move very slowly, but it continued. I parked and got out and watched the car as it entered the house. It slid down the street very slowly. I never got a good look at who was driving because it was so dark. I'm not gonna lie. The idea of it being Mike crossed my mind, but I quickly dismissed that thought because it seemed too far-fetched. When I went back in, I checked Tinder and Mike still hadn't said anything. I sent him one last message saying, "What happened? Why didn't you show up?" Then I decided I had to let it go. It's not like I really knew Mike too, so I made myself pasta and went to the living room. I was living alone at the time and was eating in the living room when I noticed what appeared to be the same car passing by again. This was about 30 minutes after I got home. The car was going in the opposite direction down the street, but when it got in front of my house, it stopped. It parked on the side of the road and I continued to watch carefully from the window so as not to be visible to whoever was in the car. The engine was on for a while and then went out. I didn't hesitate for a second and called the police. Right there, I told them that I thought someone had followed me home and was now parked in front of my house. After talking to the 911 operator, I kept looking out the window and waited. The car stayed there and no one got out. All the lights in the car were off and there was only a dim lamppost nearby. For the next 10 minutes, nothing changed. Then I saw a police car start coming down my street. It approached the car that was parked in front of my house, and then the police turned on the lights. I watched him talk to the driver for probably 5 minutes. Finally, the car left the officer, so he came to my front door and talked to me. He told me that the driver claimed to be lost and that he had simply stopped to look for directions. I knew that was a lie, so I pulled Mike's Tinder profile and asked him if by any chance the driver looked like him. The officer said yes, it was him. I couldn't believe it. Mike had followed me home. The officer told me he asked Mike to leave, but he didn't force him, and Mike said he wouldn't come back. Then he told me if Mike came back, I'd call him. Block Mike in Tinder after that. I still can't believe he followed me home after ignoring me. I'm glad that since that night I've never heard from him or seen him again. This happened in 2015 when I was much younger. It was the only time I ever used a dating app. I don't even remember which one it was, but when I walked in, I quickly ran into a guy. We started talking, and based on his photo and at the beginning of the conversation, things were going well. The guy's name was Derek, and he looked tall and strong and had blonde hair. Sure, we talked about basic things to get to know each other a little. After about a day and a half of conversation, he asked me if I wanted to meet. Now, I thought maybe it was a little early. I felt spontaneous and eager to do something, although looking back I was just immature and stupid. I thought, why not? And I said yes. Gerard then told me to go to his place that same day. That's when I started to get a slight feeling that maybe it wasn't a good idea. Even then, I knew it was probably safer to meet someone for the first time in a public place, but I really felt like I knew them. Even though we hadn't exchanged photos or spoken on the phone, I said yes, and he sent me his address and told me to come soon. He told me he was bored and not doing much, that we could watch a movie and order pizza or something. I told him it sounded good, but I was only gonna stay a few hours tops. It was like 7 or 8 p.m. at the time, so I got ready. I copied his address and pasted it into Google Maps for directions. The place was about 10 minutes away on the other side of town. His address had typical numbers, a street name, and a zip code. I followed the directions and they took me to a quiet street that was quite dark. He was entering the parking lot of a small motel that looked rather run down. Immediately I felt both angry and scared. Why Derek was telling me to meet at a creepy motel? I wanted to just turn around and leave, and that's exactly what I should have done. Instead, I parked my car in one of the parking spaces in front of the motel. The motel had 2 floors and probably about 24 in total. The parking lot was basically a long row of spaces in front of the motel rooms, and then there was a sidewalk in the middle. There were like 5 more cars in the parking lot, so there weren't many people staying there. After parking, I looked around the rooms and saw lights on in some, but not many. I stayed in my car. I pulled out my phone and messaged Derek on the dating app. I texted him, "Didn't you tell me you were in a motel?" He responded saying he was sorry and stated that he didn't want to scare me, but that he really wanted to see me. Then he said he was only staying at the motel for a few days until he could sign the lease for his new apartment. It was a complicated mess of messages, but I got the gist of it. He was just there as he moved from apartment to apartment. In a way, I believed him because up to that point he had been very kind, although it was probably foolish of me. I told him I was feeling a little uncomfortable and that the motel looked very suspicious. He said he understood, but it was the only thing he could afford given the situation with his rent and the deposit on his next apartment. Then he asked me to please come in and gave me his room number. I looked and saw that it was one of the few with lights on and was downstairs a little to my left. I stayed in my car thinking about it. For 1 minute, I told myself that the fear I felt was probably nothing. I didn't answer Derek, but after thinking about it for a while, I decided to go inside. I opened my car door and got out. When I closed the door and started walking, something caught my eye from a motel window. I looked and saw a man peering out the window of Derek's room, but it wasn't Derek in less than 1 second. Whoever this guy was quickly ducked down and covered the window with the curtain again. Although I saw him very briefly, I knew for sure that it was not Derek. He looked nothing like the picture. I stopped where he was and took out my phone. Did I text her asking who's in the room with you? He responded quickly by saying, "No one. I'm here alone." The bad feeling I had worsened, and I knew I needed to go. I walked quickly back to my car and got inside. I told Derek I saw someone in his window that wasn't him. He said something like, "No, you didn't see anybody, you see, inside." I got back in my car and left. I went back home and blocked Derek. Reflecting on that situation, I also realized how stupid I was. I'm really grateful for the lessons I took away from that experience. I can't be certain whether Derek was pretending to be someone else or he had another person in the room. Either way, it felt like a deceptive scheme, and that was undoubtedly my most unpleasant encounter with a dating app.